So looking at the code now, for this application we are going to use the same React application that we created in my previous video about creating a React application from scratch without using CRA. So if you have not watched that video, go check it out, and it's quite informative, and you'll understand how we ended up with this code. Okay, so we'll be building on top of this, and we'll now integrate the Redux parts inside this application, and then I've already created a sub application in this, which is name the color. So let me zoom this, and yeah, so name the color is a sub application. There's a sub application home, and there is a sub application called name the color, and the way it redirects to name the color is via the paths over here, which is paths.ntc, which will load my name the color application. Now the first thing that we need to do to integrate Redux into our application is to install the dependency Redux, and hence we head on to our terminal, and we'll be installing the following packages over here. Okay, so we have redux.js toolkit, which is the core Redux, and React Redux, which is which basically provides a few helpers to let React application talk to Redux, and we are of course going to install the middleware redux-saga. Okay, so let's quickly install these dependencies, and notice that we are adding these dependencies into our dependencies, not in dev dependencies. The reason is because these things are required on the browser for the application to run. Okay, so once the packages are installed, if you go and check your package.json, you will see that the redux.js toolkit is in the dependencies, React Redux and redux-saga are all added to my dependencies. So the first things first, now what we need to do is to create our in-memory store, right? So to create our in-memory store, notice that where I'm going to create my store folder. So let's create our store folder inside our parent app. So remember, we are following a structure where we have a parent application inside which we have some sub applications. So the store folder that I'm going to create right now is going to be in my parent application, right? So let's create the store folder over here. Okay, and inside this we are also going to create a few files. The first file that is going to be is create store.js. okay, so once the create store is created, so now we'll go ahead and create a store over here. So for creating a store, the Redux toolkit has a function called configure store. So we'll be using that function to create our store. Okay, so let's just import. Let me close this out. Let's import Redux toolkit, and from this we are going to import configure store. Okay, so export default, we will use configure store, and the configure store is going to take some options. Okay, so these are the options. The first thing that we are going to do is we will pass a reducer. Right now this is going to be dummy. We will pass all the reducers when we have actually created a reducer for our NTC application. Okay, so for now let's just understand what all we are going to pass in this. So we created a reducer, we added the option reducer, and we are also going to enable DevTools. Okay, so the reason why we are enabling DevTools is to debug while development. So we are going to use a DevTool extension, the Firefox extension or a Chrome extension for Redux. Okay, so once you provide DevTools equal to true, all the configurations are pre-configured into your applications so that you can use the DevTool and see what is happening in the Redux. Okay, so right now we have created our store. There is not much over here. We will come back and edit this once we have created the store for our NTC application. All right, now we will open our app.jsx. So this is the root of my application, right? So this is where my application is actually rendering onto the DOM. So this is where I'm going to inject my store. So to do that, we will just import our store first. Store from add store / create store. So the alias for add store is already created in my webpack configuration. So if you go over here, you can see that there is a add store referring to src store, which is the same folder that we created just now. The store is ready. Now to inject this store into my application, we are going to use a higher order component, which is provider. So let's go to import from, and notice that now we are working with React. So which package are we going to use? We are going to use React Redux rather than at Redux toolkit. Okay, keep that in mind. So we are going to use React Redux, and inside this there is a component called provider, and we will specify our provider over here. Now this application is the same application, so we are just building on top of it. So you earlier noticed that we have created a route for my NTC application. Now we are adding the Redux in the same thing. So we have the provider over here. Now provider is going to take a prop called store, and this is where we are going to pass our store. Okay, so let's quickly run this application and see what is happening. And let's see, I'm definitely expecting an error in the console, and let's just understand that error first. Okay, so I head back to my terminal, clear this out, and run yarn start. So my application is running at localhost 9001. So we will head back to our browser, open localhost 9001. And this is my basic application that I created. So here is my sub application, which is currently holding all the placeholders. So I've already written the cosmetic things, but we have not really integrated with the API that we created on Spring. Okay, so our intention is to integrate with that API, and hence whenever I type the hex code over here, it should make a call to the API, get the name of the color, and fill this box with the color that we searched for. Okay, now let's look at the console. On the console, you can see that there is an error which says store does not have a valid reducer. Make sure the argument passed to the combined reducers is an object whose values are reducers. Okay, so this is an expected error because in our store right now we have not provided any reducer. We have just created an empty object over here. Okay, so now we will head back to our sub application, which is name the color. Okay, so let me close these out. All right, so in name the color, you can see right now there is nothing. It's all text and some cosmetic styling and the breadcrumbs and all those things. Okay, so we'll open our project again. Let me zoom into this application again so that you can see the directory structure. Now inside the sub application, we will create another folder called store. This is my recommended way of building your application. You could follow whatever way you want, but the reason why I follow this way is because it makes it easy to extract out the sub applications later if they want to be a part of some other repository. Okay, so right now you won't understand the importance of this, but when the project starts getting bigger, this will play a very crucial role. Okay, so let's create a store over here. And inside my store, I'm going to create a few files. So we will be creating, let's create dispatchers. You can call it actions as well. I like to call it dispatchers. It's the same. It doesn't matter what we name this file. Okay. And inside the store, we are also going to create reducers.js. We are also going to create sagas.js. Okay, what else do we need? We need a file called state.js, which will define the initial state of my application. Okay, and finally I'm going to add another file called index.js to export all the things that are required from here. All right, so let's just start with the state first. Okay, let me zoom it out again, and I'll keep this project structure open so that you can see which file I'm editing. So on the state.js, we are going to simply export an object because this is what the initial state of my application is going to be. So here the requesting, we'll be creating a node called requesting, which is initially going to be false, and then we are going to have error, which is also going to be false, then color details, which is initially going to be an empty object. Okay, so this is what is there in my state right now. All right, now the second part is, let's go to our dispatchers and create the actions. So from the diagram, if you remember, the React application will talk with the actions only. So we need to create the actions, and on clicking on some button, so for this case, on entering the hex code value, we need to make an API call to fetch the details of that color, right? So that API call will be happening because of a dispatcher. So we will be creating the dispatchers over here. So let's quickly create a few actions. So we are now going to create a few actions. I will call these nodes, I'll create the following actions actually. So let's just take a look at that. Fetch color by hex. Okay, this is one. Of course, I'm gonna name the action same. Okay, and also we will be providing a namespace for my actions. So the reason why I like to provide a namespace, it makes it easier to identify when you're debugging. You can easily identify which area are you looking at and which particular sub application is actually creating this particular action. Okay, so we need a similar thing, so for RGB as well. So let's quickly update these two things. We will just say RGB. Okay, so we have fetch color by hex, fetch color by RGB, and we will also want another action which will be of type update color details. Okay, so again the same thing, we will name the same thing over here. So these are the types of actions that my NTC application, that is name the color application, is going to invoke. Okay, so now to invoke these actions, the syntax of writing an action is quite straightforward, and since it is a pure function, it is not really going to do any asynchronous calls. Okay, so export, we are going to create a function over here called fetch color by hex, and this is going to take an input of hex code, right? So when we want to fetch the color by hex, we need to pass in the hex code as well, right? And it is very simple to write an action. You just need to provide the type of action that you're going to emit. Okay, or the right word would be dispatch. So the type of action is going to be my actions dot fetch color by hex, right? And we will also pass in what hex code are we trying to fetch for. So this is that's all we need to do in the actions. So when you call this function, it is going to dispatch this particular action. And now if you recall the diagram that we saw earlier, this action will start traveling to the reducers, right? So we will handle these actions in the reducers, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's just quickly finish the rest of the actions as well. Okay, so kind of similar thing that is what we need for RGB as well. So fetch color by RGB, and we are gonna have RGB code over here, and instead of hex, this is going to be RGB, and this is of course gonna be RGB code. Okay, and the final thing is update color details. Now update color details is one of the actions that will be invoked by the middleware, right? So this is something which we will invoke after making an API call, and the API calls are always made by middleware. And if you remember by the diagram, the middlewares can also invoke actions, right? So from the middleware we will invoke this particular action. Okay, that is update color details, and this action will again travel to the reducers, and we will do some state changes over there. So let's quickly write this as well. Export const update color details. Okay, and of course this is gonna receive all the color details which is fetched from the API, and the type of this action is again gonna be actions dot it is going to be update color details, and we're gonna pass color details as the input. Okay, so this is what my actions are all about. So this is what everything that is there inside my actions. Right, now all the dispatchers are ready. Now we need to handle these reducers, right? So Yeah, okay. So let's go to the reducers now. So the way we write the reducers is also very simple. So we are creating a pure function over here as well. So let's quickly create that. Export const color reducer. This is a function which is going to take an state. So how do I know that this is going to take a state? This is kind of written in the documentation that it is always going to receive a state and the action that is being performed. Okay, so the state is something which is being read from the in-memory store. So if you remember, I was telling you that reducers are something which can read the state as well as update the state. Okay, so right now here we are basically reading the state and then we are updating the state. So we will write the logic for updating the state specific to the actions that we have just created. Okay, so we have the state over here. The first few things that I want to import is the initial state. Okay, so we need the initial state of the application, which we have already defined inside my state.js. So initial state is here, and we are going to specify the default value of state as initial state. Okay, the second thing that I want to import is the types of actions that are there in my application, which is written inside my dispatchers. Okay, so we are going to import actions from here. Okay, now what do we do inside our color reducer? Very simple. We are just going to write a simple switch case. So let's write a switch case. Now what will be the criteria on which we'll be switching? So the criteria of switch is quite straightforward. It is going to be the type of action. Okay, so we are already receiving the action, so we need to switch on action.type. Okay, so the by default, what is it going to do? It is simply going to return the initial state. Okay, so this is the default state of my application. So this is what is going to happen when the first reducer is actually created. Okay, so default state is ready. Now what do we do with rest of the action? So we will be creating case actions dot update color details. Okay, so what do we do with this particular action? We need to, so whatever we return from here becomes the state of the application. Okay, so whatever I return from that particular function is basically going to update inside the in-memory store. Okay, so this is what we are going to do over here. So we are going to return. Now we know that what is the current state of this application is defined inside the state itself, right? So we are going to destruct the state so that whatever the things are already there, all the nodes get created. So that is requesting, error, and color details. Now what do I want to update? I want to update my color details. So I'll simply write color details equal to, now with this particular action, update color details, what is the data that I'm getting? Color details, right? So this is what we are going to access over here, color details. All right. Also, a few more things that you can do is we can set requesting to false, because at this point we have already requested the data and we have the data with us and there is no error, and hence we are going to write error equal to false as well. Now I'm not going to write the details about the error scenarios because it's quite straightforward. When you are building the actual application, you can do that. But right now, for this purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to touch the error scenarios at all. All right, so we have already written case actions update color details. Now we'll create another case for actions dot fetch color by hex. Also here I'm not going to write any logic for showing a loader or anything, but to give you an idea how you can show a loader is something which will be, you'll get the idea how the state gets updated and how you can use that state to show the loader. Okay, so for both the scenarios, when we are fetching the color by hex and fetching the color by RGB, the state of my application is just going to have, let's write return, and the state of the application is again going to have the destructed state. Okay, and in this case we will have requesting equal to true. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to use this anywhere, but just for your understanding, this is how you can update the requesting equal to true and access this in your component to show a loader. Okay, so this is what is there in my reducer. Okay, so it is receiving the initial state and it is receiving the action. So whenever there is a action getting dispatched, the reducer is gonna listen to that action and perform updates into the state. Now whenever there is a update done into the state, the React application knows that there is a state update. How does it know that? Because we are encapsulating our entire application inside this particular component, and whenever there is an update in the store, the rest of the children get re-rendered. Hence you will always receive the new updated state whenever the store is updated. All right, so Redux, this thing is ready. We need to definitely export this out. Export default color reducer. Okay, all right, so we have exported out our color reducer. What else do we need to do? Is we have written state, we have written reducers, we have written dispatchers. The only thing that is left is sagas. So we have seen what actions and reducers are doing. They are doing exactly the same thing what a pure function does. They are not really making any asynchronous calls. They are just working with the synchronous stuff. Now the saga's job is to fork this particular dispatch that is traveling from actions to reducers. So whenever it is forking, now we need to fork two kinds of dispatchers. So when are we actually going to make an API call is when these two actions are getting dispatched, right? So we are going to fork on these particular actions. Okay, so let's go to our sagas, and this is there is this learning curve in Redux Saga, but once you understand everything, it is very easy to use and it makes a lot of sense, right? So just follow along. If you really want me to go into the depth of Saga, just let me know in the comments. I'll create another video for that, but just follow along and understand what I'm trying to write over here. Okay, now there are a few generator functions that are required for writing a Saga. So we will write function star. So the syntax of generator function is function star, right? So we are going to write watch fetch color by hex. So this is my first function. Okay, export. Let's just export, keep exporting all these things. Okay, so the second function is of course gonna be watch fetch color by RGB. So notice the naming convention. It's quite straightforward. When the fetch color by hex is happening, we are writing watch fetch color by hex. So which is nothing but just keep watching whenever the fetch color by hex action is getting dispatched. So now to watch that, we are going to write yield. We need to import a few effects. So Redux Saga has a few effects, so I'll be covering a few of the effects in this video, but there are a lot more and they are quite useful. So we will write Redux Saga effects and we are gonna use take every. Okay, so take every, and we need to also import our actions. Okay, so let's import my actions from /dispatchers. Okay, so whenever we are basically saying whenever this action is getting dispatched, you need to call a particular function. So that function we have not yet created. I'll come back to that. So let's just do the same thing on my watch color by hex as well, by RGB as well. So we'll write RGB over here. Now we are actually going to create our other functions, which is function we actually don't need to export these, so let's just get rid of this, and we'll write another generator function over here, fetch color by hex. Okay, so we have now created fetch color by hex, and this is the function which we want to invoke when this particular watcher is getting, whenever this particular action is getting triggered, this is the function we are going to execute. So we are going to specify fetch color by hex over here. Okay, and yeah, okay, so the same thing needs to be done for the RGB as well. So let's just do that, fetch color by RGB. Okay, and here we are going to write fetch color by RGB. Okay, so now we have the watches ready. Yes, and this is going to basically receive the action again. Okay, so this particular function, when you do take every, so whatever the function that you specify over here, the arguments will receive the entire action. So what is the entire action? This is the entire action, right? So we are going to receive this entire action inside my fetch color by hex, which is nothing but we just want hex code from here, right? So we don't need the type over here because we are already making sure that whenever the type is this, only then this particular function is gonna get executed. Hence the type is already taken care of. We just need the hex code. Okay, so we just take the hex code over here. The same thing in this case, it is going to be RGB code. All right, now in the hex code, now what do we do? Now this is the place where we are going to make an actual API call. Okay, so we are going to do the exact same thing that we do with fetch. So we are going to, instead of async await, since this is a generator, we'll directly use yield and we will make a fetch call. Okay, so fetch call, this is a simple get call, so not many configurations required. We are just gonna write http localhost 8080. So my Spring server is running on 8080, hence we are going to write http localhost 8080, and we are gonna have colors / hex and whatever the hex code is. So we'll write hex code over here. Of course these should be backticks now. Okay, all right, so colors, hex code, this is what my API is. For RGB, it is gonna be same. Instead of this, we are gonna have RGB code, and this is gonna change from hex to RGB. All right, so once the response is here, we have const data equal to yield response.json. So this is the exact same thing that you do with a fetch call. So we always do response.json. So we are gonna do the same thing here as well. Const data equal to yield response.json. So now I have the response with me. Now what do we do with this response is basically trigger the action. So we know that once I have the response, I can trigger an action, and that action is gonna basically update my reducer. That action is gonna basically travel to my reducer, which will in turn update my in-memory store. So let's do that. And to trigger an action from Saga is we are going to use another effect over here, which is put. Okay, so all we need to do here is yield put. We are just saying that we are gonna trigger fetch one second, we are gonna trigger update color details. So we are gonna update color details with whatever the data that we got. Okay, so this is how we are going to dispatch an action from the Saga, and for safeguarding all these things, we are gonna put it inside a try catch block. Okay, on catch, I'm not gonna do anything. You can trigger another action to update your store with whatever the error message that you want to show, and when the app re-renders, you can render that onto the screen. But for simplicity, I'm just gonna do console.error, and right here let's just console.error, the error that we got over here, the exception. Okay, the same thing that we need to do over here as well. So we don't really have a separate action, so we are gonna use the same action over here, and of course we want to put this inside my try catch block. Okay, so inside my try, I'm gonna move all these three statements inside, and inside my this we are gonna have a console dot error the exception. Alright, so this is basically my API calls. Now how do we tell my application that this is where my middleware is? So to do that, we are going to we have done everything right now, but it's just that we have not created this particular fork that I was talking about, right? So the fork is still missing. So let's do that. We will create another function which is going to be a generator. So function star, we will call this ntc sagas. Okay, so ntc saga is right here, and inside this we are going to use another effect called all. Okay, so previously in the older versions of Redux we used to have a effect called fork, but now they've updated that to have all, and you can just specify all your watchers over here. So these are watchers, these are handlers, and inside this all we are gonna do is yield all, and this is gonna take an array of whatever the effects are. So the effects are quite straightforward. Watch fetch color by RGB and watch fetch color by hex. Okay, so this is my ntc saga ready. We are gonna export this out. Okay, everything looks fine to me. Let's do export default actually, because this is the only thing that we are exporting from here. Alright, so my sagas are also ready right now. So we have updated our dispatchers, we have updated our reducers, we have updated our sagas, and we have updated our initial state. Now from the index.js, I would want to do a few things. I think we can directly export them from here. So let's just do it in this way. Export from reducers, export from reducers, where we are gonna write default as color reducer. Okay, and another thing that we want to export from here is from my sagas, which is default as ntc saga. Alright, so these are the only two things that I want to export from my sub application store. I'm not really sure whether this will work right now, but we will try to execute and see and tackle the problems that we face. Okay, so everything is exported from here. Now all I need to do is let my configure store function know that there are some things that are there inside my applications that are supposed to be taken care of, right? So what we are going to do here is we are going to import my things from @apps, name of the color, and the store. From here we are going to import our color reducer, ntc saga. Okay, actually let's just not import ntc saga yet, and we will write a reducer over here as ntc, and this is gonna receive color reducer. Okay, I think the reducer should be ready now. So let's just go to our application and verify it quickly. So the build has succeeded. We go to our application, hit a refresh, something is broken, can't access property type of undefined. I think this is not gonna be a function call actually. So we are just gonna have specify the reference of color reducer, and the color reducer should be over here. Now let's quickly head back to our website and see if everything is fine. We have of course not integrated sagas yet into our application. We will do that, but let's just see whether our reducer is getting accessed properly or not. So let's go here and see the build has succeeded. Let's go to our website, open the DevTools, and inside the DevTools you need to install an extension called Redux DevTools. And once you install the Redux DevTools, you will see this kind of thing inside your console. And let's look at the state of our application. So you can see that whatever the initial state that I provided, that is requesting false, error false, color details for an empty object, is all getting referenced properly. Okay, so previously there was an error. Now that we have provided a reducer over here, we are able to specify all these things here. All right, now inside our parent application store, I want to also create a folder called Sagas. Okay, so inside the Sagas, I'm just gonna have one file called index.js. Okay, so what this the reason why I'm creating the Sagas over here is because right now we have only one sub application. Later, let's say there are multiple sub applications, so we want to let our parent application know that there are multiple sub applications, and we want to import all the Sagas from each of those applications and combine them over here. Okay, so you can see that I'm going to import from redux-saga effects again. One second. Yes, and we are going to import the same effect that we used to combine the reducers earlier. So the to combine the Sagas earlier, right? So we used all to combine these two Sagas. Now we'll use the same all to combine the sub application Sagas, right? So let's go back to my index.js. Let me quickly find it. All right, now let's go back here and we will export another generator called root saga. Okay, and inside my root saga, I'm just gonna yield all, and right now in this array there is only going to be the NTC saga, right? So let's just import our NTC saga as well, so which is there in my @apps, name the color, store, and from here we get our NTC saga, and let's just call the NTC saga over here. Okay, so now we have told our application that there can be multiple sagas. So the reason why I'm writing like this is because we are following a structure of having sub applications. So if you want, I can create a separate video on explaining this entire sub application concept, but I've been talking about it for quite some time now, so you probably get an idea what I'm trying to do over here. So this particular parent application can have multiple sub apps, and each of those sub apps will have their specific sagas, reducers, and all those things. And in my parent application, I'm just making sure that I import all the reducers from each of these applications and all the sagas from each of these applications and combine them into the root application. Okay, hence I've named this as root saga. All right, so this part is okay. Now I think when we have more sub applications, we will have XYZ saga, ABC saga, and so on, and all of these this particular array will basically invoke all of those functions. Okay, so NTC saga is getting invoked over here. Now the final thing that we need to do is to let our application know that there is a middleware in our application. Okay, so that thing will also be a part of the configure store. So let's quickly go to the documentation and see what the syntax of that is. I kind of forgot about it, so let's quickly do that. We go to redux-saga. All right, so the way we are going to create our middleware is something like this. So we are going to import create saga middleware from here and just create the middleware. So let's quickly do that. We will go and import saga middleware from redux-saga, and this const saga. Oops. Let me quickly check that again. Okay, we are gonna import create saga middleware from here, and we will call const saga middleware to have create saga middleware. Okay, so my middleware is ready. Now we need to use that saga middleware and run my sagas, right? So all my sagas are defined inside index.js, right? So root saga is my entry point of all the sagas. So we are just going to use this and import everything over here. So let's do import from /sagas, and here we are going to import our root saga, right? So we know that root saga is something which is not exported yet, so let's just do that quickly. All right, so my root saga is now exported. It's getting the reference over here. Now all we need to do is run saga middleware dot run and provide my root saga to this. Now one final thing is something that we need to do with the configure store. So right now we have done everything, but we have not told our store that there is a middleware. So we have created it, we have told saga middleware that all my sagas are right here, but we have not told my configure store that okay, there is a middleware in the application. So that has to happen via Redux. So let's go to Redux documentation as well and see what they have for configure store. All right, so here is my configure store API, and this is what I was looking for. Okay, so the middleware is supposed to be provided like this, and it is gonna have a get default middleware function. All right, so let's try to do this now. We will write middleware, which is gonna have get default middleware function, and we will do get default middleware dot concat of our saga middleware. Right, I think this is what we need to do over here. So we are basically letting the store know that this we have a saga middleware which is going to be injected in our application. You can go on concating over here by adding multiple middlewares. So you can create middlewares for as many things as possible. You can create middleware for logging the actions and so on. So it is totally depends on your use case. You can create your own middlewares. There are a bunch of third-party middlewares as well, which you can go on concatenating like this. I'm not sure why this is marked as deprecated. I see it in the documentation over here, but seems like it is deprecated. I'm not sure why it is deprecated yet. So let's just go ahead and see if it is working fine or not, and then we will talk about the rest of the things. Okay, so let's head on to our application again and see if things are working fine. So let's hit a refresh, and I don't see any errors. So it seems like my application has accepted this store and everything is fine over here. Now the next part is to integrate this, use this store and integrate these dispatchers, fetch color by hex and fetch color by RGB into my name the color component.